I'd always believed home would be my sanctuary, not the battlefield where I lost everything. The betrayal written across my son's face, no, not my son, cut deeper than any IED ever could. My stomach hollowed as I stared at features that couldn't possibly be mine. My name is Evan Walker, and I'm 36 years old. I live alone now in the house I once shared with my wife of 8 years, Alyssa Walker. Before that night in the delivery room changed everything. When the nurse placed that brown-skinned, curly-haired baby in Alyssa's arms, the room went silent. My jaw clenched as I watched her tears fall, not from joy, but fear. The truth was undeniable. "Congratulations," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. "You and whoever did this, enjoy your new family." Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I stepped off the transport plane, the cold night air hitting me like a slap across the face. The tarmac stretched out before me, lonely and vast under the buzzing yellow lights. 274 days since I'd felt American soil beneath my boots. 274 days of sand, sweat, and counting the hours until I could come home. The sound of my boots against the pavement made a rhythmic thud that matched my heartbeat. Final step, final mission, done. My phone vibrated in my pocket before I even reached the terminal. I fished it out with fingers still stiff from the recycled air of the military transport. Alyssa's mom. "She's in labor. Mercy General. Hurry." My stomach dropped. The baby wasn't due for another week. I'd calculated everything down to the hour, making sure I'd be home in time. Turns out, the universe had other plans. I didn't bother with my duffel. Left it with a buddy and sprinted to the short-term lot where my old Chevy had been sitting for 9 months, courtesy of my dad who dropped it off yesterday. The key was under the mat, just like he promised. The engine roared to life on the first try. Good omen. The empty midnight streets blurred as I pushed well past the speed limit. Red lights seemed longer than the deployment itself. I drummed my fingers against the steering wheel, thinking of Alyssa alone in that hospital room. Well, not alone. Her mother would be there, probably her sister too. But not me, not where I should have been. Remember the smell of hospital disinfectant mixed with that artificial pine air freshener they use? Hits you right when you walk through those automatic doors. I'd always hated that smell, but tonight it meant I was in the right place. "My wife," I told the nurse at the reception desk, still in my dusty fatigues. "Alyssa Walker, she's having our baby." The nurse looked me up and down, recognition softening her expression. "Third floor, room 312. They're expecting you, Captain." I don't remember the elevator ride. Don't remember the hallway. Just the door swinging open and Alyssa's cry when she saw me. "Evan, you made it!" Her face was flushed, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. For a moment, everything felt right. I was home. I was where I belonged. "Wouldn't miss it for anything," I said, rushing to her side. I took her hand in mine, feeling the wedding band I'd placed there 8 years ago. "I'm here now. You can do this." The next hour was a blur of contractions, encouragement, and Alyssa squeezing my hand so hard I thought she might break it. I didn't care. Let her break every bone if it helped. "One more big push," the doctor said, gloved hands ready. "The baby's almost here." Alyssa bore down, face contorted, a primal scream tearing from her throat. Then, relief, exhaustion, the sharp, indignant cry of new life filling the room. "Congratulations," the doctor said, lifting our child. "It's a beautiful baby boy." Time stopped. Have you ever had a moment where your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing? Where reality and expectation crash into each other so violently that your mind just shorts out? The baby the doctor held aloft had dark brown skin. Not like mine, not like Alyssa's. His little fists were clenched, his dark curly hair matted with birthing fluids. The room went silent. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. I looked at Alyssa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Evan," she whispered, "I can explain. Sometimes genetics—" "Don't," I said, my voice hollow. "Just don't." Her mother stood frozen in the corner, mouth open but no words coming out. The nurse busied herself with charts, suddenly very interested in her paperwork. I walked to the bassinet where they'd placed him after the initial check. Tiny fingers, tiny toes, perfect in every way. Just not mine. The truth doesn't need explaining, Alyssa. My pulse was steady, my jaw locked tight. It's right there for everyone to see. The nurse approached cautiously, clipboard in hand. "Will you be signing the birth certificate, sir?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice immediately. Then, softly, "Not for another man's child." Alyssa started crying then. Real tears, not the exhausted happiness from moments before. "Evan, please, don't go. We can talk about this." I adjusted my uniform, straightened my back. Years of military discipline kept me upright when all I wanted was to collapse. "I think we're done talking," I said, turning toward the door. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly as I walked down the hallway. Behind me, I could hear Alyssa screaming my name, her voice bouncing off sterile walls and following me all the way to the elevator. I didn't look back. Rain hammered against the windshield as I drove. Thick sheets of water made the headlights almost useless, but I didn't slow down. The wipers fought a losing battle, squeaking across the glass. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from the cold or something else entirely. My parents' house appeared through the downpour, a two-story colonial with warm yellow windows cutting through the darkness. The porch light was on. They were waiting. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there. The rain drummed on the roof of my truck, a steady rhythm like distant artillery fire. For a moment, I wished I was back in Afghanistan. At least there, I knew who my enemies were. The front door opened. Dad stood silhouetted against the hallway light, watching. He didn't wave or call out, just waited, patient as always. I grabbed my duffel bag and made a run for it, boots splashing through puddles. Dad met me at the bottom of the porch steps, his hand extended. No words, just a firm handshake that said everything. His grip was strong, calloused from decades of construction work. Those hands had built half the houses in this town, including mine. "Come on in, son," he finally said, voice low and steady. Mom appeared in the doorway, concern etched across her face. "Evan? Where's Alyssa? Is the baby—" She stopped when she saw my expression. "June," Dad said quietly. "Get him a towel." I stepped inside, dripping water onto the entryway floor. The house smelled like fresh coffee and the lemon polish Mom had used on the furniture since I was a kid. Some things never changed. Mom returned with a towel and handed me a beer without asking. I took it, grateful for the cold bottle in my hand, something solid to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. "I'll get the guest room ready," she said, disappearing upstairs. Dad nodded toward the living room. "Sit down before you fall down." I sank onto the old leather couch, the same one I'd watched Patriots games on growing up. My duffel bag sat at my feet, packed in haste, uniform, toiletries, wallet. I stared at it, suddenly unable to remember what else I'd thrown in there. Dad took the armchair across from me, not pushing for details. That was his way. Wait until I was ready. Mom came back downstairs but lingered in the doorway, unsure whether to join us or give me space. The clock on the mantel ticked away the minutes. Outside, the storm raged on. I must have fallen asleep there on the couch, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Mom was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of bacon and coffee pulled me into consciousness. "Morning," Dad said, already dressed for the day in his flannel shirt and work jeans. "Coffee's fresh." I nodded, rubbing my face. My phone buzzed on the side table. 27 new messages, all from Alyssa. Mom appeared with a plate of food. "I tried calling Alyssa last night, but she didn't pick up. I was thinking I should try again." "Don't," I said, more sharply than intended. "Mom, please, just don't." Her face fell, but she nodded. "All right, eat something at least." I scrolled through the messages while picking at my eggs. "Please come back." I panicked. "It's not what it looks like. We need to talk about this. Answer your phone. The doctor needs to know about your family medical history. I need you to sign the insurance forms. The baby needs coverage. The last one made me set down my fork. The baby needs coverage, not our baby. The baby." I typed one reply, "Handle what you made." Then I turned off my phone. Mom and Dad exchanged looks across the table but said nothing. 3 hours later, a car door slammed in the driveway. I was in the shower, but I heard Mom's voice rise in surprise. By the time I got downstairs, wrapped in an old bathrobe, Alyssa was standing in the living room. She held the baby against her chest, its tiny face barely visible beneath a blue blanket. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged beneath them. "Evan," she said, voice breaking. "Please, just talk to me." Mom hovered uncertainly by the staircase. Dad stood with his arms crossed, face unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here," I said. "Where else am I supposed to go?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is still your son. You can still be his father. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. That's not how biology works, Alyssa. Family isn't just biology, she insisted. We can work through this. Come home. Home? I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and controlled. No, Alyssa. That was our home. You turned it into a crime scene. She flinched as if I'd raised my hand to her. You should leave, I continued. Take care of your child with whoever helped you make him. Evan, I walked past her and opened the front door. Rain still fell outside, lighter now. Goodbye, Alyssa. She stood there a moment longer, clutching the baby tighter, before walking slowly to the door. At the threshold, she turned. This isn't over. I closed the door without answering. Through the window, I watched her struggle to secure the baby carrier in her car, rain soaking through her thin jacket. She wiped at her eyes before sliding into the driver's seat. The car backed down the driveway and disappeared around the corner. Mom came to stand beside me. She won't stop there, will she? She whispered. I kept my eyes on the empty street where Alyssa's car had been. No, she won't. 2 days later, I found myself at a downtown law office with marble floors and hushed voices. The receptionist had led me to a glass-walled conference room where I sat waiting for 20 minutes, watching lawyers scurry past with coffee cups and stacks of folders. When the door finally opened, I stood to greet a Korean-American woman in her late 30s, dressed in a charcoal suit with not a thread out of place. Mr. Walker? Nora Kim. Her handshake was brief but firm. I apologized for the wait. Court ran long. No problem. She settled across from me, placing a leather folio on the table between us. So, your father said this was urgent. Military divorce situation? Yes, I cleared my throat. My wife had a baby 2 days ago. It's not mine. Not a flicker of surprise crossed her face. Just a small nod as she opened her folio and clicked her pen. Tell me everything, chronologically. I laid it all out. Deployment, homecoming, the delivery room scene, Alyssa's visit to my parents' house. Nora took notes without interrupting, occasionally glancing up to study my face. I have our marriage certificate and deployment paperwork in here, I said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Also the mortgage documents. The house is in my name only. Nora nodded. Good. What about bank accounts? Investment portfolios? Retirement? Joint checking for household expenses. Everything else is separate. Military pension? I'm fully vested. 8 years of marriage, 12 years of service. She made a note. Any significant assets acquired during the marriage? The house, my truck. We have about $30,000 in savings. In whose name? Joint, unfortunately. She capped her pen and leaned back. Here's what you need to understand, Mr. Walker. In this state, adultery is grounds for divorce, but it doesn't automatically disentitle her from seeking alimony or division of marital assets. My jaw tightened. She cheated and had another man's child. I understand. But courts look at contribution to the marriage, length of the union, and future earning potential. She tilted her head. Has she worked during your marriage? On and off. Retail, then marketing assistant. Nothing stable. That works in our favor. But we need to move fast. Priority 1 is securing your finances. I remember my father once telling me that in the middle of a crisis, find the person who's thinking clearest and follow their lead. Looking at Nora's calm precision, I knew I'd found that person. What do I do first? Immediately transfer your personal funds to accounts she can't access. Document all communication. Don't delete anything she sends you. Don't engage emotionally. Nora's voice was measured, clinical. Has your father mentioned the Walker Family Trust? I nodded. He co-manages it. Perfect. Move what you legally can into that trust. It predates the marriage, which gives it protection. She wrote something on a sticky note and handed it to me. This is my cell. Call me the moment she escalates. And she will escalate. I tucked the number into my wallet. And then we file for divorce on grounds of adultery before she can file against you. It was strange how calm I felt, sitting there discussing the dismantling of my marriage like a business transaction. But after the ice-cold clarity of that hospital room, nothing could really touch me. I spent the next 24 hours executing Nora's plan. Online banking transfers, calls to investment firms, changing passwords and security questions. Dad helped me move funds into the trust, money I'd saved during deployments when I had nothing to spend it on. By evening, I'd secured what I could. That's when Alyssa's email arrived. Evan, I've consulted with someone who says I'm entitled to half of everything, including your military benefits. I'm trying to be reasonable here. Let me know when you're ready to discuss what's fair, or we can let the courts decide. I forwarded it to Nora with one line. She's making her move. Nora's response came within minutes. Filing preliminary petition this afternoon. Beat her to it. That evening, I drove back to our house, my house, to collect more of my things. As I pulled onto the street, I spotted Alyssa's car parked across from the driveway. She got out as soon as I stopped. Finally decided to come home? She folded her arms across her chest. Just getting clothes. I unlocked the front door without looking at her. She followed me onto the porch. You know, everyone at the hospital thinks you're a monster, abandoning your family like that. I turned to face her, keys still in my hand. You ended that family in that hospital. It doesn't have to be over, she said, her voice softening. Babies are complicated, Evan. We could get through this. Where's the baby now? The question seemed to throw her. With my mother. And its father? Her face hardened. You're being cruel. No, I'm being accurate. Tears welled in her eyes. The same performance I'd seen at my parents' house. But this time, when I didn't react, something changed. The tears evaporated, replaced by a flicker of rage. You think you're so perfect, she hissed. You think you can just cut me off and walk away? I'll take everything, Evan. The house, the savings, alimony, everything I deserve. You're welcome to try. Her voice rose. Everyone will know what you did to me, how you abandoned me when I needed you most. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and measured. Good. Let them know everything. The calm in my response seemed to infuriate her more than any shouting match would have. She stormed back to her car, yanking the door open so hard it bounced against its hinges. This isn't over, she screamed before slamming the door. I watched as she reversed violently, tires screeching against the pavement. She peeled away, leaving the smell of burned rubber hanging in the air. The bank's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like distant insects. I'd spent most of my adult life in places lit just like this. Mess halls, barracks, field hospitals, places where nothing feels permanent. Fitting, considering what I was doing. So these accounts will be completely frozen? I asked the bank manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who'd handled my finances since before my first deployment. Yes, Mr. Walker. She won't be able to access or withdraw from any of these joint accounts without your signature. She slid the paperwork across the desk. I'm truly sorry about all this. I nodded, scribbling my name at the bottom of each page. The pen felt heavy, like I was signing away more than just money. 8 years of marriage reduced to account numbers and legal terms. Remember those old war movies where someone cuts the wires to defuse a bomb? That's what this felt like, methodically disconnecting each financial tie that could blow up in my face. My phone buzzed as I walked back to the car. Nora's name flashed on the screen. Evan, I've got an update. Harvey Lowell has filed for temporary spousal support. Her voice was tight, professional. He's claiming emotional abandonment during pregnancy. My laugh was short and bitter. Emotional abandonment. I was deployed. I came back as soon as I could. I know, it's a tactic. He's hoping to establish a narrative before we can present the infidelity evidence. Keys clicked in the background as she talked. He's asking for $3,000 per month, plus exclusive use of the marital home. Like hell. Exactly. I've already filed our countermotion. Judge Michelson is pretty level-headed about these claims. She paused. How are you holding up? It was a simple question that should have had a simple answer. But the truth? I felt hollow, like someone had carved out everything inside me and left just enough to keep walking and talking. I'm fine, I said, the default answer of every soldier who's ever been asked that question. Good. Don't engage with her directly. Every communication goes through me now. She hung up with a promise to call tomorrow. I drove to my parents' place for dinner, the wheels of my truck eating up the familiar country roads. Have you ever noticed how when your world falls apart, the most ordinary things become your anchors? The smell of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's boots on the porch steps, the creak of that third stair nobody ever fixed. Mom had made pot roast, my favorite since childhood. We ate mostly in silence until Dad cleared his throat. You hear from that lawyer of yours today? I nodded, sharing what Nora had told me. Dad's face tightened, but his voice remained even. That woman's got some nerve. Gary? Mom warned, but her eyes were sad. It's true, June. He turned back to me. Listen, son, this is going to be a long road. The important thing is patience. Don't fight anger with anger. I nodded, pushing potatoes around my plate. I know. Your mother and I, we've seen marriages end over less, and over worse. The ones who come out whole are the ones who keep their dignity. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Nora. New development. Call when you can. I excused myself to the back porch, the screen door slamming behind me with a familiar spring-loaded snap. What's the new development? I asked when Nora picked up. Alyssa has opened 3 credit cards using your deployment address. She's been building debt under your name while you were overseas. The night air suddenly felt colder. How much? Almost $12,000. Clothes, furniture, electronics. The charges start about 7 months ago. 7 months, around when she must have gotten pregnant, building a nest with another man's child, on my dime. I'm filing fraud claims first thing tomorrow, Nora continued. This actually works in our favor, shows a pattern of deception. After hanging up, I sat on the porch steps, listening to crickets and trying not to imagine Alyssa and her lover spending my money, laughing, planning their future while I was dodging IEDs in Afghanistan. But the images came anyway, stabbing behind my eyes. My phone pinged with a social media notification. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Alyssa had posted photos of herself holding the baby, her eyes wet with tears that looked rehearsed. The caption read, "Still waiting for him to come home to his family. Some wounds cut deeper than war." 36 likes, 15 sympathetic comments, a digital pity party built on a foundation of lies. I took screenshots, saved them to a folder I'd labeled evidence, and closed my laptop with a decisive click. The sound reminded me of the safety on my service weapon, the solid certainty before action. If she wants a war, I said to the empty room, she picked the wrong soldier. 1 week crept by like a slow-motion nightmare. I'd been staying at my parents' place, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded football trophies and military recruitment posters. But every morning, I drove past my own house, just to check on it, I told myself. Just to make sure. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. I pulled into my driveway, the engine of my truck growling to a stop. The grass was getting long, unruly, neglected. I'd always kept that lawn perfect, even had Mom and Dad check on it during deployments. I opened the garage with my remote and was relieved to find my mower still there. At least they hadn't sold that off. The familiar smell of gasoline and cut grass hit me as I wheeled it out. Simple tasks. That's what kept me sane. The disciplined routine of maintaining what was mine. The mower roared to life on the second pull. I started at the edges of the yard, working in methodical lines across the front. Sweat beaded on my forehead in the morning heat. It felt good to be doing something physical, something productive, almost normal. That's when I felt it. Eyes watching. I glanced up mid-stride to see movement at the living room window. The blinds twitched, then settled. Someone was inside my house. My house. I kept mowing, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Another pass, another glance. This time, I caught a clear look, a man's face peering through the blinds. Not just any man, Andre Lewis, the personal trainer. The one who'd fathered Alyssa's baby while I was overseas dodging bullets. He was in my house, standing in my living room, looking through my windows. I finished mowing as if nothing had happened. Precise lines, not a single blade missed. When I was done, I put everything back exactly where it belonged in the garage, closed it up, and drove away. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I called Nora the moment I was out of sight. "They're living in my house," I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "Who is?" "Alyssa, and him. Andre Lewis." Silence on the line, then a sigh. I was afraid of this. Let me make some calls. She called back that evening while I was helping Dad reorganize his workshop, another simple task to keep my mind occupied. "I'm sorry, Evan. Because the property is considered marital and the divorce isn't final, she has legal temporary occupancy rights. We can't force them out yet. She brought her lover into my home. I know, and we'll use that in court. But for now, there's nothing we can do unless you want to claim domestic violence or destruction of property, which would require evidence. So they just get to stay there? In my house? Sleep in my bed? For now. But every decision they make is building our case." I thanked her and hung up, then walked outside into the cool night air. Ever have that feeling where you want to scream but know it won't change a damn thing? That's where I was, trapped in a system that seemed designed to reward the guilty. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Couldn't sleep. Kept seeing their shadows behind my curtains. I drove over without really planning to. Just found myself parked across the street in the dark, watching my own house. The porch lights were still on at 2 a.m. My lights, my electricity. The living room glowed dimly behind the curtains. Music played, faint but audible even from where I sat. A tap on my window startled me. Dad stood there, concern etched in the lines of his face. He climbed into the passenger seat without waiting for an invitation. "Saw your truck gone," he said simply. "Figured you'd be here." We sat in silence, watching the house. "This isn't good for you, son. They're in there like they own it." Dad's weathered hand rested on my shoulder. "They'll hang themselves. People like that always do." I didn't answer. What was there to say? The law was giving my wife and her lover a free pass to play house in the home I'd built. 3 days later, Alyssa posted on social media a picture of champagne glasses on my coffee table. My coffee table. The caption read, "New beginnings." Location tagged. Our address. My address. I forwarded it straight to Nora with one line. Documentation as requested. That evening, I stood at the fence line of my own backyard, hands in my pockets, watching the silhouette of a man moving behind my kitchen curtains. Andre Lewis, cooking dinner in my kitchen, using my pans, probably drinking my whiskey. "Keep making memories," I muttered, the words tasting like metal in my mouth. "I'll own them soon." Nora's voice was crisp over the phone. "The judge scheduled mediation, first week of August." "That's almost a month away," I said. "Calendars are backed up, but I've filed a motion to expedite based on the circumstances." She paused. "Meanwhile, there's a preliminary hearing tomorrow about freezing the accounts. Harvey Lowell will be there." The name made my jaw tighten. I hadn't met Alyssa's attorney yet, but Nora's descriptions painted a clear picture. Slick, smug, and specialized in helping cheaters walk away with more than they deserved. "Will Alyssa be there?" I asked. "No, just attorneys and the judge's clerk. 9 o'clock, courtroom C." The courthouse hallway was all polished marble and echoing footsteps. Nora walked beside me, briefcase in hand, posture perfect. I'd worn my best suit, not my uniform. This wasn't about being a soldier anymore. This was about being the man who wouldn't be robbed twice. "Nora Kim, right on time," called a voice from the bench across the hall. The man who stood was exactly what I'd pictured. Expensive suit, silver tie clip, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Harvey Lowell extended his hand first to Nora, then reluctantly to me. "Captain Walker." Finally, we meet. His handshake was limp, his palm smooth like he'd never worked a day in his life. Shame we couldn't resolve this before involving the court. Nora checked her watch. "We have 10 minutes before they call us in." "Perfect." Harvey leaned against the wall, casual, like we were discussing a business deal rather than the dismantling of my life. "I've been authorized to offer a settlement proposal, one that could give everyone peace." I felt my face hardening but kept silent. "My client is willing to vacate the property within 30 days if you'll agree to a 50-40 split of assets and a 2-year support structure. Very reasonable, considering." "Considering what?" I asked, my voice level. "The circumstances. A new child, a newly single mother." The courts tend to be sympathetic. Nora started to speak, but I touched her arm gently. "Mr. Lowell," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "I don't pay for what I didn't break." His smile faltered for just a second. "Everyone pays something in divorce, Captain. It's just a matter of how much." "Not this time." Harvey's eyes narrowed slightly. "My client has been very patient. Your client is living in my house with another man while trying to cash in on my deployment savings," I cut in, still quiet but firm. "There's not enough patience in the world to make that right." The clerk called our names before he could respond. As we walked toward the courtroom, Harvey leaned closer. "Think about it, Captain. War has casualties. So does peace." I just kept walking. That night, Mom brought over dinner, her way of checking on me without making it obvious. We sat at their kitchen table, plates of pot roast between us, Dad asking careful questions about the hearing. "The clerk took the filings," I explained. "Judge will review everything next week." Mom nodded, then disappeared upstairs for a moment. She returned with an accordion folder, weathered at the edges. "You'll need these," she said, sliding it toward me. "Every receipt, every bill from before you deployed. I saved them all." I opened it to find meticulous records, utilities, mortgage payments, even grocery receipts. "Mom, document everything," she insisted. "Every penny you earned, Every expense you paid while overseas. Don't let them take what you sacrificed for. I spent hours that night sorting through papers at their dining room table. Combat pay statements, wire transfers to the joint account, money moved into savings. Each transaction a thread in the tapestry of a marriage I thought was solid. 5 days later, Nora called with the first piece of good news in weeks. Judge granted the freeze on all joint accounts pending verification of deposits, she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. They can't touch your deployment money until they prove where it came from. That's all of it, I said. Every dollar came from my service. I know, that's why we're winning. But Alyssa wasn't surrendering. By the weekend, I started getting texts from acquaintances, people we'd known as a couple, checking on me with strange caution in their messages. Hey man, you okay? Heard things got rough after deployment. Just wanted to see how you're holding up. PTSD is no joke. The narrative was spreading. I'd changed after Afghanistan. I'd become cold, distant, unstable. Alyssa was just a victim of my military trauma. I didn't respond to any of them. Saturday afternoon, a familiar truck pulled into my parents' driveway. Tom Reyes stepped out, still in his work clothes, grease stains on his jeans. We'd served in the same unit. He'd been our mechanic, the guy who kept everything running when the world was falling apart. Thought I'd find you here, he said, clasping my hand before pulling me into a quick hug. Heard you were getting railroaded? We sat on the porch steps, 2 beers between us. Tom didn't ask for details. He already knew enough. People are figuring it out, he said after a while. The story doesn't add up. She's posting all these fresh start photos with the new guy, then crying about how much she misses you in the same breath. I took a long swallow of beer. Let her talk. That's it? Just let her keep spreading that bullshit? The sunset cast long shadows across the driveway as I stood, Tom rising beside me. I'm done explaining, I said simply. Truth doesn't need a defense attorney. Mediation day dawned clear and cold. I stood in front of my parents' bathroom mirror, adjusting the crisp lines of my dress uniform. The weight of the medals felt right, earned through sacrifice, discipline, and honor, all the things my marriage had lacked in the end. You don't have to wear that, Dad said from the doorway. Yes, I replied, straightening my shoulders. I do. The Community Mediation Center occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown office building. Nora met me in the lobby, briefcase in hand, her expression calm but focused. Remember, she said as we rode the elevator, let them talk first. The more they say, the deeper they'll dig themselves. I nodded. My heart beat steady and slow, the rhythm of a man prepared for battle. The conference room felt smaller than I expected. A long table with water pitchers, notepads, and the scent of industrial carpet cleaner hanging in the air. The mediator, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, introduced herself as Mrs. Harmon. Then they arrived. Alyssa entered first, dressed in a cream-colored suit I'd never seen before, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Harvey Lowell followed, smirking as he placed his leather portfolio on the table. And behind them, Andre Lewis, shoulders back, chin up, like he was striding into the gym rather than a legal proceeding that would determine his future. My jaw tightened at the sight of him. This was the man who'd been in my bed, in my house, the father of the child who'd shattered my world. Everyone, please be seated, Mrs. Harmon said, her voice betraying no emotion. We're here to find an equitable resolution before this proceeds to court. Alyssa's eyes locked onto mine from across the table. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married, uncertain, searching for reassurance. Then it vanished behind a mask of practiced vulnerability. I'd like to speak first, she said, her voice already wavering. Right on cue, tears welled in her eyes. Evan and I built a life together. 8 years of marriage. I supported his career, waded through deployments, kept our home. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but that doesn't erase everything we created together. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table. I'm not asking for everything, just fairness. Just enough to start over after he abandoned me and my child at the hospital. I felt Nora tense beside me, ready to object, but I placed my hand on the table, my wedding ring long since removed. Fairness, I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Ended the night you lied to my face. It ended when you claimed another man's child was mine. It ended when you tried to commit fraud with my name. Harvey cleared his throat. Captain Walker, I don't think emotional accusations— This isn't emotional, Mr. Lowell. I interrupted, my voice level. This is factual. And here are the facts. I opened the folder Nora had prepared, laying out documents one by one. Credit card statements showing purchases made in my name while I was deployed. Mortgage payments I made from overseas. Tax returns showing I provided 93% of household income over the past 3 years. Nora produced her own stack of papers. And here, she said, sliding glossy printouts across the table, are social media posts made by Mrs. Walker. The photos showed Alyssa and Andre inside my house, my living room, my kitchen, my backyard, champagne glasses raised in celebration. Captions like "Home Sweet Home" and "New Beginnings" dated just weeks after I'd filed for divorce. Defendant claims temporary residence for shelter needs, Nora continued. These images suggest celebration, not necessity. Mrs. Harmon's expression hardened as she examined the photos. Alyssa's face flushed crimson. Those are private. They were public posts, Mrs. Walker. The mediator corrected her. Accessible to anyone. Andre shifted in his seat, then leaned forward with a dismissive wave. You can't prove I lived there. Visiting isn't illegal. Nora smiled thinly as she slid one final document forward. Water and electricity bills with Mr. Lewis's name added as a resident, dated 3 weeks ago. Silence fell over the room. Alyssa stared at the paper, then at Andre, her expression a mixture of shock and betrayal. I think I've seen enough, Mrs. Harmon said, gathering the documents. I'll review these materials and provide my recommendation to the court. We'll take a 15-minute recess. As she left, Harvey muttered something to Alyssa, who shook her head violently. Andre stood first, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Alyssa followed, but paused at the door. You'll regret humiliating me like this, she hissed, voice barely above a whisper. Everyone will know what kind of man you really are. I met her gaze steadily. I already regret trusting you. That's enough regret for one lifetime. They disappeared down the hallway, Andre's arm around Alyssa's shoulders, Harvey trailing behind them with his phone already at his ear. Nora watched them go, then turned to me with the hint of a smile. She's finished, she said simply. All that's left is the judge's signature. 1 week later, I stood in the county courthouse again, the polished wood of the gallery bench hard beneath my palms. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long rectangles across the floor. A memory flashed. Alyssa and me years ago, sitting in a similar courthouse to sign our marriage license, her perfume sweet as she leaned against my shoulder. Judge Riley entered, her black robes swishing as she took her seat. The room fell silent. In the matter of Walker versus Walker, she began, her voice carrying the weight of finality. She adjusted her reading glasses and opened a thick folder. I glanced across the aisle. Alyssa sat rigidly beside Harvey, her knuckles white where she gripped her purse. Andre slouched beside her in an ill-fitting suit, his usual confidence noticeably dimmed. Having reviewed all evidence presented in mediation and subsequent filings, Judge Riley continued, this court finds as follows. She began reading through pages of findings, each one another nail in the coffin of Alyssa's claims. Adultery has been proven to the satisfaction of this court through DNA evidence, witness testimony, and the respondent's own admissions. Alyssa flinched. Financial misconduct has been confirmed through documentation of fraudulent credit applications and unauthorized use of the petitioner's military status. Another page turned. The court finds that property located at 1478 Westfield Drive, including all contents therein not specifically designated as personal effects, reverts solely to the petitioner, Evan Walker, as separate property maintained primarily through his earnings and family trust contributions. Harvey Lowell rose to his feet. Your Honor, if I might— You may not, Mr. Lowell, Judge Riley cut him off, looking over her glasses. You've had ample opportunity to present mitigating factors. None were found compelling. Harvey's mouth snapped shut. He sank back down beside Alyssa, who had begun to tremble. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court orders immediate vacation of said property by respondent Alyssa Walker and any cohabitants within 72 hours of this ruling. Alyssa's control finally broke. A sob escaped her, then another. Beside her, Andre sat motionless, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on some middle distance, a man realizing that the consequences he'd always dodged had finally caught up. Mrs. Walker, Judge Riley addressed Alyssa directly, her tone softening slightly. This court doesn't take pleasure in anyone's hardship, but actions have consequences, and yours have been determined to breach both marital and legal trust. You've been granted 3 days to remove your personal belongings. Court services will supervise if requested. She looked to me. Mr. Walker, you are prohibited from interfering with removal of Mrs. Walker's personal effects during the designated period. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge signed the final decree with a decisive stroke. This matter is concluded. The gavel struck once, the sound like a gunshot. Nora Kim leaned close, her voice barely audible. It's over. 3 simple words, 8 months of battle, condensed into an exhale. Outside the courthouse, a small cluster of reporters waited. News of the case had spread after Alyssa's social media campaign backfired. Cameras turned our way as we descended the steps. Mr. Walker, can you comment on today's ruling? Do you feel vindicated by the judge's decision? What would you say to military spouses watching this case? I paused, the questions hanging in the air. I could say plenty. About betrayal, about justice, about the long nights staring at the ceiling wondering what I'd done to deserve this. But all those words belonged to a different man, one who still needed explanations. No comment, I said simply, continuing down the steps with Nora at my side. That evening, the sheriff's deputy's cruiser parked behind my truck in the driveway. The locksmith worked quickly, the metallic sounds of tumblers and pins echoing through the fading daylight. Alyssa stood on the curb, arms crossed tightly across her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. Andre paced nearby, occasionally kicking at the ground, muttering curses that carried on the evening air. Just personal effects, remember, the deputy reminded them. Furniture and fixtures stay. As the locksmith handed me the new keys, I turned and looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time. Alyssa's mascara had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. Andre's swagger had vanished, replaced by the uncertain movements of a man who'd gambled and lost. Something inside me had expected to feel triumph in this moment, or anger, or even pity. Instead, I felt nothing. Just the weight of keys in my palm and the certainty that everything that mattered had already been decided. This was always yours to lose, I said quietly. Alyssa's gaze met mine, her lips parting slightly as if to speak. But no words came. The deputy gave a curt nod. We're all set, Mr. Walker. I turned away from them for the last time, climbed the 3 steps to my porch, and unlocked the door. The house smelled different, like unfamiliar cologne and stale perfume. But underneath was something familiar. Home. I closed the door behind me, shutting out their voices, their drama, their chaos. In the sudden silence, I stood motionless in my own entryway, listening to the steady rhythm of my breathing. In, out, in, out. The sound of a man, finally alone, at peace. 6 months after the courthouse steps and the changing of locks, I stood in the center of my living room, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and wood stain. The transformation was complete, not just on the walls and floors, but in the air itself. Every trace of Alyssa and Andre had been scrubbed, sanded, or painted over. Remember that feeling when you finally clean out a room that's been cluttered for years? That weightless moment when you can finally see clear to the other side? That's what my entire house felt like now. I'd taken my time with the restoration. Some things you can rush. Healing isn't one of them. Each weekend, I tackled another project, ripping out the stained carpet they'd left behind, refinishing the hardwood underneath, painting every wall in colors I chose. The physical work became a kind of therapy, sweat washing away memories, hammer strokes punctuating the end of sentences I didn't need to say aloud. The doorbell chimed, breaking my reverie. Mom stood on the porch with a ceramic dish covered in foil. "Lasagna," she announced, stepping inside. "For dinner tonight with your father." She paused in the entryway, looking around with an approving nod. "It feels peaceful in here again, Evan." I took the dish from her. "Thanks, Mom." She wandered into the living room, her fingertips grazing the new blue-gray paint. "You know, I never liked that beige color she picked. This suits you better." "Blue-gray's the color of calm," I said, setting the lasagna on the kitchen counter. Mom smiled. "Always was, even in your childhood bedroom." The sound of a truck pulling into the driveway announced Dad's arrival. He'd promised to help me rebuild the back fence, the final project on my restoration list. Through the window, I watched him unload lumber from his pickup with the same methodical precision he'd taught me years ago. "Your father worried about you," Mom said quietly, joining me at the window. "More than he let on." I know. I did know. Dad's way of showing concern was through practical actions, showing up with his tools, helping fix what was broken. "He doesn't worry anymore," she added. Outside, Dad looked up, and gave a short wave. I nodded back. 2 hours later, with the fence posts set and the crossbeams in place, Tom's old Chevy rumbled up the street. He parked behind Dad's truck, emerging with a six-pack and his trademark grin. "Figured you boys might need refreshments," he called, crossing the lawn. Dad wiped sweat from his brow. "Perfect timing." Tom handed beers around, then surveyed our work. "Looking good, Walker. Place is shaping up nice." We sat on the back steps, cold bottles sweating in our hands, the May sunshine warming our shoulders. "Heard anything lately?" Tom asked, his tone casual but the question loaded. I took a slow pull from my beer. "Don't need to." "Well, I have," he continued. "Thought you might want to know they're not exactly living the dream." I said nothing, but he pressed on. "Marcy from Dispatch says they're in that rundown complex near the interstate. Paper-thin walls, constant fighting. Neighbors called the cops twice last month." He shook his head. "Guess that true love isn't working out so well without your paycheck behind it." Dad caught my eye, his expression neutral. "Andre lost his training gig at the gym," Tom added. "Apparently he got into it with a client. Big scene, right in the middle of the floor. Manager had enough." I nodded but kept my thoughts to myself. What was happening to them wasn't my doing. It was the natural consequence of choices poorly made, the universe balancing its own scales. And that little online business she started? The one selling those essential oil things? Tom snorted. "Folded after 3 months. Too many refund disputes." "That's enough," Dad said quietly. Not harsh, just final. Tom raised his hands in surrender. "Just saying, karma's real." Later that evening, after dinner with my parents and after Tom had headed home, I stood alone on my front porch. Twilight softened the edges of the yard, painting everything in gentle blues and purples. The new fence stood straight and solid along the property line. The lawn was freshly mowed, hedges trimmed, flower beds weeded, order where chaos had once lived. From somewhere down the street came the sound of children laughing, a sprinkler turning. Normal neighborhood sounds, peaceful sounds. I sipped my drink, feeling satisfied but not smug. What had happened to Alyssa and Andre wasn't my concern anymore. Their story would continue without me, messy, complicated, and entirely of their own making. Mine would continue here, in this house I'd fought to keep, among people who'd stood by me when it mattered. As the first stars appeared overhead, I looked out over the yard I'd reclaimed and said softly to no one but myself, "Justice doesn't need applause, just peace." The words settled into the gathering darkness like truth finding its home. I turned, went inside, and locked my door against the night. Not in fear or anger, just the simple act of a man securing what was his, leaving the past where it belonged. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.